I mentioned at the beginning of chapter 12 on interactivity and PDF that when I first got InDesign CS5, I created this particular website just based on InDesign's interactive features. Here we can just view the artist's work like that as we go through, and it's got some other pages about the artist. However, when I exported this to SWF, I ended up with a 12 megabyte SWF file, and that's just unusable because you can't expect people to sit and wait for 12 megabytes to load. So I decided this was a bit of a failure, and I didn't think it was going to work. This interactivity still had some problems on the export, and it still does, but it's not as bad as I thought. Now, at the beginning, I had used Photoshop files, PSD files with transparencies in the background, and had these 12 images that I cropped in here for the thumbnails, and then each one had a large version with it. So one day I had the idea and said, let's forget the Photoshop files, let's convert them all into JPEGs and make sure they're the right size. Now, the Photoshop files were the right size. I didn't have them really large and scale them back down. I sized them 72 ppi at whatever pixel size I was using on the screen. So there wasn't too much resolution in them. So when I did that and created the SWF file, this turned out to be 2 megabytes. Nothing great, but still a huge difference on 12 megabytes. And then I did one more thing. Instead of cropping the images to create these thumbnails, I went into Photoshop and just created the images exactly the same size. And again, I used JPEGs rather than Photoshop files. Then the SWF file came in at just about 1 megabyte. Still a little large because Flash is supposed to be a small file size, but certainly manageable. Barely, admittedly, but it is manageable. So what's the lesson? Well, when you're creating your interactive files, be very careful. Don't use PSD files because obviously the compression doesn't work very well. Use JPEGs. Probably some other images work, maybe TIFFs work, maybe it compresses them well in export. I haven't experimented with that or read about it. But use JPEGs, and if you are cropping images down, don't crop them from the original like this in InDesign. Crop them in Photoshop and place them in your InDesign file at exactly the size you're going to use them, because it does appear that the export to SWF is not perfect. Hopefully there'll be a fix out. There may even be a fix by the time you are listening to this. But as to date, Adobe hasn't released one. But I think you'll find that this is a great feature, this interactivity. It makes it easy for designers to create Flash files, and it's only going to get better with the next version of InDesign CS6, which I'm really looking forward to already.